And it's not very fun being subjected to character assassination on a daily basis by the 77th Brigade or the Times of London or the Daily Mail or the New York Times or the Washington Post or Rolling Stone or Atlantic Monthly, or we could go on and on. That's no fun. But I would welcome being proven wrong, and that this is a tempest in a teapot, and in fact, the regulatory authorities that were correct, and this was safe and effective. Unfortunately, for the world, the data are not showing that, and what this gets to, I'm afraid, is that folks like myself, Ryan Cole, Pierre Curry, others that are going to be testifying in support of Andrew Bridgen are being treated as enemies of the state because we are speaking inconvenient truths, which are fundamentally threatening to the state, because the state has taken this unilateral position, emphasized by the full spectrum of its PSYOPs, PSYWAR propaganda capabilities, deployed on the world, deployed on your citizens, asserting that these products are safe and effective without having the data. So they got out ahead of their skis, to use an American metaphor. I don't know if you would use that here in the UK. Yeah, so they got out ahead of the data. They had thrown away the rule book to give them the data to make an accurate assessment. They deployed this propaganda prospectively without having the data to support it. And it turns out they were wrong. Now they got a problem because they basically repeatedly lied to the public. And they have also, in these actions, demonstrated to the public that they are willing to employ modern psychological manipulation technology, much of which has been developed here, on the citizenry to advance. You know, we can all, this is one of these slippery slopes. We can all kind of get behind, well, it's good to use nudge technology to, the famous case of Schiphol Airport with the little enameled flies in the male urinals to get males to be more direct. And then, well, that's good. That saves money. That advances public health. Why shouldn't we deploy this kind of nudge technology to get people to stop smoking? Makes sense. Smoking causes deaths. Passive smoking is a risk. Nobody, if you're a non-smoker, you don't like to have people smoking in restaurants while you're there. Absolutely, for the public health, we should deploy nudge technology to reduce tobacco use. Well, then, what about global warming or climate change? What about integration of different ethnic groups? You can't watch a BBC program without, or let alone Netflix, without being bombarded by the latest wokeism trends. But that's all nudge technology. That's what it is, okay? Developed right here in the good old UK, and very effective. And then, as I said, when a government gets to the point where they feel that it's acceptable to deploy full-on modern PSYWAR technology developed for offshore combat against its own citizens, then their ability to come to an informed decision, whether it's about public health or it's about immigration policy or open borders or Brexit or fill in the blank, they no longer have the ability to make an informed decision, because with modern technology, every single thing, every bit of information that they acquire, that they're subjected to, coming through the approved, censorship-vetted GB News, let alone BBC, is government propaganda, has been filtered through a government propaganda lens. And the technology is to the point where it can and does control not only everything you encounter in terms of information, everything you think and feel is manipulated. This has to do with the Dunning-Kruger effect, the Milgram experiment, where most people will respond in accordance with authority figure, so the white coat phenomena. The Dunning-Kruger effect of people think they're smarter than they actually are, and all the ancillary derivatives of that. People are like clay to be molded when subjected to neurolinguistic programming and other modern psychological manipulation technologies being deployed by the government. And what's, I think I infer that the Western governments and the European Parliament and Barack Obama made an explicit speech about this at Stanford at the Hoover Institute, that paradoxically, in order to protect democracy, we must have censorship. We must deploy this PSYOPs technology, this technology designed for offshore combat to counter the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and name your latest group. I don't want to get into the Gaza conflict. Matter of fact, I will. One of the things that I find most fascinating about the Gaza conflict is we have two highly developed psy-war capabilities going head-to-head on the world stage. Hamas and the IDF. They are both extremely skilled at psy-war. And they are punching it out. And you can see that. The most tangible expression I've seen of that was the New York Times headlines about the missile that landed on the hospital. Remember that? Okay? And the New York Times was flip-flopping in real time, which I argue is an illustration of the problem of corporate media that has become entrenched in the logic of advocacy journalism. That old school journalism, like the Epoch Times practices religiously, much to its detractors' attacks, in modern journalism, objective reporting is considered passé. And what young journalists are taught now in J school is advocacy journalism, which I argue is a euphemism for propaganda. And what happens when what used to be considered the publication of record, New York Times, becomes captured by the logic of advocacy journalism, is that they can find themselves on the wrong side of an issue quite quickly. They can think that the politically correct thing to take is X, and then suddenly there's a change in the dynamic of the accepted narrative, and suddenly they find themselves on the wrong side of the fence. Whereas if they had been just objectively reporting the facts in the old school way, they wouldn't have a problem when the narrative shifts, because they're not reporting from the standpoint of reinforcing the narrative, they're reporting from the standpoint of reporting, right? What actually transpired, and trying to get to the underlying storyline of what transpired and why, rather than trying to promote some narrative that advances a particular cause.